Ladies and gentlemen, I think that we are going to start, and then our colleagues can always join us current the meeting. So, dear colleagues and friends of Publish What You Pay from and outside the movement, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this webinar focusing on the role of civil society in unlocking value in Africa's transition minerals. My name is Ketakandjina Rafitson, but you can just call me Ke. I am the executive director of Publish What You Pay. I'm based in Madagascar, where the power is currently cut. I'm hoping that my generator will do the job. But I'm really delighted to have you all today. Before digging into the matter, I'd like to inform you that we have French and English interpretation services available. I'll invite you to click on the corresponding icon and choose your preferred language. I would also invite you to mute your microphone if you are not speaking to ease the conversation. And as we cannot do a round table of introductions, I also invite you to drop in the chat box your name, your organization, and eventually your email if you are not yet part of our network. So to start, why this webinar? On September 5th, we at Publish What You Pay launched a new briefing showing that industrial policies to promote trade in the materials needed for batteries, solar panels, and other clean energy technologies could boost Africa's GDP by at least $24 billion a year and create at least an extra 2.3 million jobs on the continent. The methodology behind this research has been developed by William Davis, an economist specialized in natural resource governance with a background in trade, tax, and illicit financial flows, and the research was reviewed by a peer economist, Elvis Avenio, senior researcher at the Center for Competition, Regulation and Economic Development from the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. We are very thankful to them for their help in crafting this research. But getting back to the context, the fact is that the vast majority of Africa's transition minerals are destined for manufacturing industries outside the continent. For the moment, according to our research, only 2% of the continent's exports of energy transition minerals are dedicated to other African countries. Africa is currently stuck at the bottom of energy transition value chains, while most of the profits are made elsewhere in the world. Even if some African countries do process transition minerals to some extent, the continent remains almost completely excluded from downstream and often more lucrative segments of value chains for these minerals, such as design, manufacturing, marketing, and sales. This represents a major problem for the continent, and we do believe that African governments have the power to change the game. Our research shows that African countries can make the most of their energy transition minerals by adding value to them, transforming them into products that can be then exported at better prices, and or using them to address Africa's own development needs, including building clean and affordable energy systems, which can in turn considerably reduce the poverty, the energy poverty that we are living in. So African countries should be strategic in deciding how to increase their participation in value chains. They should focus on specializing in the parts of the value chain in which they are most competitive, even if it means importing minerals from other countries, rather than seeing it as a necessity to retain the entire value chain of minerals within their own soil. And retaining value on the continent is yet possible through flexible and collaborative strategies among African countries. Through this approach, there is also a potential for Africa to produce renewable energy technologies, and regional economic cooperation and preferential trade agreements are therefore key to ensure African countries can trade minerals amongst each other and become competitive in the renewable energy market. Well, this is the big dream, But we're all aware that mining has a huge human and environmental cost with devastating impacts, in particular for communities living in mining areas, indigenous people, women, and rights defenders. This is why we recommend that no-go zones and safeguards must be put into place to protect ecosystems and the rights of affected populations, including a fair, ongoing process of free, prior, and informed consent, the indigenous people's right to give and withdraw consent to mining on their lands. In a word, then, value addition has to go hand in hand with strengthening accountability of the whole transition mineral value chain. We want to see resource-rich states adopt comprehensive national and regional laws for due diligence, public participation, and benefit sharing. Renegotiating investor-state dispute settlement mechanisms in bilateral investment treaties are critical steps to empower states to implement regulations that ensure accountability in the transition mineral sector. We therefore have three main recommendations to African countries through this research that we have just launched. For us, governments should, first of all, work together to process, refine, and manufacture energy transition minerals on the continent, specializing in the parts of the value chain in which they are most competitive. Second, they have to finalize the planned African Continental Free Trade Area and ensure it enables African countries to access each other's transition minerals and clean energy components and technologies at lower prices, helping them to build domestic industries. And finally, they have to strengthen transparency and accountability of the mining sector by adopting comprehensive national and regional laws and ensure mining companies respect the rights of the indigenous and local communities. That being said, we are conscious that governments and institutions alone cannot achieve this ambitious project. All stakeholders have to play a key role in making it happen, and civil society is on the forefront. This is why we organize this webinar with you today. There is a double aim for that. First of all, exploring the crucial role of civil society in advocating for policies that promote value addition and foster cooperation among African nations to strengthen regional value chains. And second objective is facilitating dialogue on how civil society, governments, and the private sector can collaborate to ensure that the exploitation of transition minerals drives sustainable development and prosperity across the continent. For discussing these matters, it is my pleasure to welcome two brilliant minds among us. First, we have Davy Malungisa, who is a senior advisor on natural resources and climate change at the Southern Africa Resource Watch. He is a lawyer and sustainable development expert with over 26 years of professional experience. He holds tertiary qualifications covering the fields of law, sociology, energy, and management practice. Welcome, Davy. Thanks a lot for accepting the invitation. Secondly, we have Muthuso Dliwayo, who is a lawyer and the executive director of the ZELA, the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association. And he has 24 years of experience working on environment and natural resources governance. Among other degrees, I had to keep it short, Muthuso. He holds a master's in constitutional and human rights law and a master's in environment and development from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. He recently obtained an environmental, social, and governance investment certification from the CFA Institute. Muthuso's research and advocacy interests are in climate change and energy governance, business and human rights, and the extractive industry at the national, regional, and international levels, with particular focus on Chinese investments in Zimbabwe's mining sector, including the critical mineral sector, of course. So thank you very much, Davy and Muthuso, for agreeing to join us today. Dr. Marit Kitto, the Interim Director of the African Minerals Development Center of the African Union, was also aiming to join us, but she finally couldn't due to unforeseen events. During the next hour, we will first give the floor to our experts, each for 10 minutes, with potentially some follow-up questions from my side, and then we'll open up the floor to the audience for a 20 minutes exchange and discussions. For now, once again, I'm inviting you all to introduce yourselves in the chat box. And yeah, let me turn to you first, Davy. In your opinion, what role can civil society play in terms of regional integration and policy harmonization towards the goal of unlocking value in African transition minerals? What are the current gaps and what do you recommend for strengthening regional frameworks to support investment, sustainability, and effective management of transition minerals across Africa? The floor is yours. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I cannot see myself. I hope you are seeing me.
I do see you.
Okay, with a broad smile. Yes, yes. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, the conversation is a very timely, especially putting the civil society angle, because what we are experiencing, I'm working at Southern Africa Resource Watch. So we've done some studies, and we continue to do some studies. So the first point is that just understanding what is happening is a difficult issue, especially around the memorandum of agreements that are being signed between governments and private sector players or government with the other governments. In the case of Zambia, we have the initiative to beneficiate transition minerals so that they can manufacture batteries. So last year, we were just looking for the agreement between DRC and Zambia, just the text. In that room where we had a lot of Zambian and DRC-based civil society, we could not produce that memorandum of cooperation between the two countries to value add, to manufacture batteries, to set up special economic zones. All that information was not available for those people who were in the room. So it took us to go to the website of the US State Department just to get a supportive MOU, trilateral MOU between DRC, Zambia, and the United States, still to support some form of cooperation around manufacturing of batteries. So the point is that the role civil society and its own governments, if we're in a national context, there is not sufficient exchange of information in terms of what are the intentions for value adding the transition minerals. So the key issue then for the story I'm telling is that it's only this year, last month in August, after a year, that I made in a presentation the statement that we are failing to find the agreement between DRC and Zambia. And at that point, I was corrected that, oh no, it's openly available. Then after a few minutes, a WhatsApp was sent to me, and I got access of. It's a very thin, very thin document, and so the fundamental aspect then is to say access to information about the developmental aspirations of Africans, our governments, our private sector, and ourselves as civil society. We need to be very sure about the text that is available. Then secondly, linked to that, the point for civil society is that when these projects are taking place, they are infrastructure projects. Even the intention to say we want to initiate a project, there is a need for informed consent from communities. I think Mtuso will speak about that at another point. So it means the interest of civil society is also to ensure that the state agency role is not privatized. it's open enough in a way that there is citizen participation. But that does not take place in a vacuum. It's a matter of governance. So we need to move away from government. We are concerned, even now when we talk of beneficiation, we are concerned about government, about the bureaucracy, about what takes place within, especially the executive arm. But also we can include parliament, and if we want to talk of the rule of law, we also include even the role of the judiciary. So there's no, at this point, a unifying vision nationally that allows civic participation to be involved in putting ideas around mineral beneficiation. So this is also a point that if we are then to proceed, is just to make sure that there is an understanding around sustainability, because when we are talking of transition minerals, we are not only talking of the products that are green technologies. We are doing it within the context of climate change. We're doing it within the process of mitigation. So you'll find that within our regions, there is a shortage of finance, capital. So most of the projects that one can think of are finding it difficult to reach financial closure because of lack of capital. And it is at this point that we are then finding ourselves talking of climate finance. But that point of climate finance must be considered within the context where there's private sector involvement. And I give again the example of the DRC Zambia project. We are finding high-level resolutions to support manufacturing, but it's very difficult to pinpoint the projects that are on the ground. And it takes time even for an infrastructure project to gain currency. And at that point, that's where you then see that maybe these MOUs are part of a geopolitical, we need to interpret them in a geopolitical sense or geoeconomics. What then we find is that there is no enabling regional policies. We have the African Mining Vision, we have the draft Green Minerals Development Strategy from on the AU side, and the Mineral Development Center as an institutional side. But what we are not then seeing is that at a regional level, even if there's some sense of domestication at national level, but the regions, SADC region, for example, is missing in the picture. We cannot see the regional mineral strategy for SADC promoting or working, for example, with DRC and Zambia. What we are seeing is Zambia going directly together with DRC to external powers. So what we can give as an example is that the trade in these minerals is actually still following colonial patterns. There is a need to decolonize those patterns, because if you look at the Lobito corridor, for example, just look at the type of trade infrastructure that is being supported by the Western countries. You find that the Lobito corridor is going through transition mineral zones in the DRC, in Zambia, to the port of Lobito, so that they transport raw minerals. So it means that's not supportive of value addition in our region. If you go to Mozambique, where there's graphite, you will find that graphite is being exported in its raw form to California, for the production, as feedstock for the production of EV batteries for the for Tesla, for example. So there is fragmentation. That's the point, and that fragmentation needs a deliberate African vision in terms of the strategy, so that there is deliberate investment in creating regional value chains. I say regional value chains because first of all, these minerals, you'll find graphite in Mozambique, you'll find manganese in South Africa. And there is need to coordinate in a way that we have regional manufacturing hubs based on the competitive advantage of a particular country. So the point then is to say, even if we are looking at our regional protocols like the SADC trade protocol, it's not at this point a point of discussion when we are talking of critical or transitional minerals. So there is we are doing that work as well right now to promote dialogue within SADC, so that we have a harmonized value addition policy in terms of the industrial policy of SADC. And that is another point that we are then saying it must then be supported by issues of capacity building for some of the countries where there is shortages, for example, in the skills part. So there's interest for us to evaluate and see whether we've got a fit for purpose human capacity development infrastructures, which is going to support the localization of our industries. Then finally, if we are looking at the way we are exporting raw materials and the needs for solar panels, wind turbines, and other green technologies, you are also finding out that there are people within our region who are arguing that we don't need to add value because China is already an overcapacity, and the imports from China for the technologies that we need are good for consumers, because if we manufacture them in our region, they are going to be too expensive compared to the capacity that China has invested. But I think the argument is that the same way China developed, it did not develop in the same cautious way we are being told that we must not add value within our region. Japan, China, I think they had some clear incentives, including possibly copying some of the technologies that they then adapted to their circumstances to actually industrialize. So we need to have this long view that this transition is not just for a short term. Let's build capacities that can last, that are sustainable. And I think for now, I can just put these as some of the issues that we can look at, especially for us to not, as civil society, not to exclude engagement with private sector in a way that we want to understand the types of investments in a way that we build in equity and justice within the investment plans that are put on the table for value addition. I'll stop here, then we can engage with the in questions.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much, Davy. You raised very important points, on access to information, also the need to respect communities' rights, of course, geopolitics and geoeconomics at play, and the interesting example you gave of China and Japan in terms of trade, and also this need of long-term vision for us to develop this common market potentially of transition minerals value chain. And thanks for mentioning that interesting example of an MOU between DRC and Zambia and the US and the difficult pathway you took for doing that. I think it perfectly illustrates the state of, still difficult pathway for Africa, but I think the reflection has started and we are here to contribute to it, especially from civil society perspective. So yeah, thanks for that. Now, Mutuso, according to you, what are the key areas where civil society can focus its efforts to really maximize the benefits of transition minerals for local communities? What are the actionable steps for CSOs to engage with stakeholders and advocate for better regulatory practices? And finally, what are the strategies you'd recommend for enhancing community participation and ensuring that local benefits are realized through transition mineral projects? You know that we are running the Just Transition Minerals Africa campaign for the moment within Publish What You Pay, and that's really the aim. People before profit, and how can our communities benefit from it? So yeah, the floor is yours, Mutuso. You have 10 minutes, please.
Thank you very much for the invitation by the Publish What You Pay and for giving me this opportunity to share my perspectives in terms of the role that society organizations can actually play to make sure that value addition actually help in terms of the benefits that are accrued to the countries that are producing and also the communities. So I have challenges with my network. It's not very good. So I'll just switch off the video. I just wanted people to see that I'm here. Yeah, so for me, the starting point is basically the statement that was made by the UN Secretary General at the launch of the UN Secretary General's panel on critical minerals. And allow me to sort of borrow generously from his statement there, where he said, a world that is powered by renewables is a world hungry for critical minerals. For developing countries, critical minerals are an opportunity to create jobs, diversify economies, and dramatically boost revenues, but only if they are managed properly. I think that's where the catch lies, but only if they are managed properly. And as you know, both the Publish What You Pay and also the panel itself is actually now produced a report titled The Resourcing the Energy Transition, Principles to Guide Energy Transition Minerals Towards Equity and Justice. And I think for me, one of those principles, which is principle 4, that's where the issue of value addition and beneficiation actually is anchored on. Through value addition, we're able to create jobs, we're able to create opportunities. I think the African Mining Vision talks about the linkages that are there that could actually come out from the mining sector. And this is where those opportunities like job creation and also getting better value from the export of these minerals once they are processed. But how do we ensure that we get that value? I think that's the focus of this conversation this afternoon, and the role that society organizations can actually play. So for me, the starting point is basically turning principle 4 into action. That is at the regional and national level. It is a principle that is there. How do we translate that into action to make sure that it is realized? So we start by trying to define what is value addition. I think this is something that we know that it has been in existence for a long time. It's not new that we are talking about value addition. We had it in other minerals, and we're now having it again now in transitional minerals. But what does value addition and beneficiation mean? I think this is where the role of think tanks, like the Southern Africa Resource Watch and many others that are there, can actually help us to understand, so that when we engage, whether it is the private sector or a government, then I think we are clear the prospects of value addition and beneficiation, what it entails and how best it can be done. More often than not, a society organization, we struggle when we're asked to say, look, what does it really mean in terms of value addition and beneficiation? And we simply say it's value addition and beneficiation. Yet that's not how it should be. We should be able to provide the convincing arguments to government, convincing argument to the private sector. And I think the researches that the likes of Southern Africa Resource Watch is doing, that can now be broken down to help society organizations to have that better understanding in terms of how best this can be done. I think that can help in terms of advocacy. Because when you do advocacy, you are assumed to be more knowledgeable than the people that you are engaging, the people that you are trying to influence. So if we go there and don't really show how best this can be done, then those people that we are trying to engage, whether it is the private sector, the government, the international community, then that is China, the US, then they will dismiss us to say you don't really understand what you are talking about. So that's why we need to pull that expertise that we have. Is it geologists that can help us understand? Is it engineers? Is it economists that can help us to say, look, this is how best it can be done? And then once we are equipped like that, then we can now effectively engage the other stakeholders, because that way we'll have a detailed understanding on how best this can actually be done. And I think we have documents there that we can use. This has already been made reference to by the speaker before me in terms of using the Africa Green Mineral Strategy. It just outlines how best this can be done. And I think for me, I see greater opportunities if we use that as a document. So one of the things that we can do at the national level and even the regional is coming up with the policies, regulatory laws and policies that can be used to promote value addition and beneficiation. Yeah, I think when you look at those countries that have actually succeeded in terms of promoting value addition and addition, they have very clear policies and regulatory frameworks in terms of what needs to be done. So as we speak today, if you look at those countries that are interested in transitional minerals from Africa, they have clear policies and strategies. But what about ourselves? We don't even have those clear policies and strategies. So how are we expecting to be able to benefit from the extraction of these resources? How are we expecting to be able to benefit from value addition when we are not even clear ourselves in terms of what it is that we want to get? How are we going to do that value addition and beneficiation? So without that, I think we'll continue to sing the blues, if I may put it that way. So I think for me, that's the starting point, to come up with clear policies that are aimed at value addition and beneficiation. And that's where, as society organizations, we can make some greatest impact. I come from Zimbabwe, and I've seen our government, and it's not just Zimbabwe only. I think it applies to all the African governments coming up with this knee-jerk reaction, ad hoc policies. Today, we are told that the export of raw lithium, which is a critical component and which Zimbabwe has in abundance, has been banned. But tomorrow, we are told that it has been unbanned, and you don't really understand what is really happening. So why was that imposition there in the first place? And what has now changed to make sure to result in this unbanning? Then again, it's due to that lack of clarity, due to that lack of policies. So that's what we basically need. That's so that we don't have those policy incoherences that results in some serious problems in those knee-jerk reaction. But again, another important point is basically at the regional level, those regional integration. There's no way we can have value addition without regional integration and the creation of what David referred to as those value addition clusters. Again, this is where we talk about clear policies. We may all want to do value addition and beneficiation, but is this possible? It's not, because from what we understand, the quantities and the quality that are required, maybe one country may not be able to come up with all those, and that's why you need these clusters. But if there's no regional integration, if the major focus is basically on what works for us as Zimbabwe, what works for us as Zambia and DRC, then we have those serious problems. And I think that's why even this example that has been cited, Zambia and DRC, they're just looking at from their own point of view as Zambia and DRC. But I mean, aren't there other countries that also have those resources that can jump in? And then probably out of that, we can come up with an MOU that is more comprehensive, that is inclusive. I think this is what the African Mining Vision is talking about. But we still see that singular approach that's influenced by the so-called sovereignty. But that has not taken us anywhere in the past, and it will not take us anywhere again, even when it comes to this critical mineral. So if we are not learning, then we have some serious problem. And that's why the divide and rule will actually continue. That's why the rest of the bottom will actually continue to as well, because Zambia and DRC, they are basically thinking to say, okay, this is an opportunity for us to benefit. But I mean, you can't do that outside the collective in terms of the region. And that's why we end up having these, the Lobito corridors. I mean, people celebrate that, but what does that really signify? It is the old same ways of doing business that has not helped us in the past. Those are raw materials that are being shipped without any value addition. But when you talk to people, they celebrate that it is now there. And we hear even the Chinese are also countering the Lobito corridor by reviving the Tanzania-Zambia railway line. And all those are actually aimed at shipping. So no one is really thinking about the value addition, and it is us that should actually be responsible for coming up with those policies that will stop. But once we continue with this, where we celebrate these MOUs that are actually brokered by other people, not necessarily by the African Union, by the way. We hear the prominent role that the USA is playing there. So those are serious problems. But what about the benefit sharing mechanism to the communities? We know that communities traditionally have accounted the costs that are associated with mineral exploitation without necessarily benefiting. And we see that happening again and again. That's why we need those deliberate policies that create benefit sharing mechanism that explicitly includes communities. So communities should not be an afterthought, but when these regulatory frameworks are being developed, we need specific provisions that actually look at the interests of communities. I come from Zimbabwe, and at one point we tried what we called community share ownership schemes. Those failed, not necessarily because the principle itself was not good. I think the idea itself was good, but it was the implementation that was problematic. So again, we hope that we can learn from that. I've read the Nigerian mining law. It talks about community agreements. These are all critical that can actually ensure that we have those benefits. If you go to South Africa, there's those labor and social agreements. Yeah, all those actually help in making sure that there's equity in terms of the benefits that are shared between communities and those that are distributed. Then, of course, we need to mobilize the communities. I mean, so that they actually understand that there's an opportunity there and that they can also participate in the policy and decision-making processes. You provide them with the necessary capacity. You organize them. I mean, mobilizing is not good enough. Organize them so that they're able to engage effectively. Then these benefit sharing make how we benefit as communities. So I think if we do that, then we can have some really opportunities for communities countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mutuso. That's very rich, and I like especially this focus on communities, because that's one of the purpose of Publish What You Pay, as you know, is to really empower them so that they can, be efficient in the quest for equity and also justice in the energy transition. I take one particular point from what you have been saying, that's the lack of clarity in a certain kind of way is killing us. So we need really, and I do agree with you on that, clear policies and clear regulatory framework towards what we need in terms of development of the value chain, and also regional integration is really key to achieve this plan. And I'm thankful also for you to mention the UNSG CTM panel, which is something, a critical momentum for us to seize, especially as Africans, to pass on these messages and really, abide the principles that multiple civil society organizations across the world have developed and have to be implemented following that panel. So we are all looking forward to that. And you have the link in the chat box if you are interested in knowing more about that panel. But now, colleagues, for the sake of time, I'm now opening up the floor to the audience. If you want to intervene, please raise your hand, introduce yourself, and I'd like you to be short and sharp, go straight to the point so that a lot of people can participate for the time we have. So yes, please, Coulibaly Ba-Aliou. Hello, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. I am Ba-Aliou Coulibaly from Mauritania. maybe this I didn't get the opportunity to join the precedent meeting related to this subject, since in my country you may know that we have been facing challenges related to internet interruption as a consequence of the presidential election, the last presidential election. Unfortunately, it's a matter of days. Anyway, we talk about it later. I appreciate what has been said by the intervenant. Mulanga, and also my friend from Bulawayo, related to what can be done from the perspective of civil society in the resource-rich countries in Africa. As a civil society activist and also the president of Publish What You Pay, the opportunities that we have in our country related to the potential of critical minerals, but also the potential of natural resource energy related to, sun and also green energy, So what I think should be the focus of the civil society in the perspective of this new agenda will be first, be able to monitor the transparency of the contract. Not new, we have been doing it with the mining and the oil and gas, but this is a new things. We should know what kind of contract exists and how can we monitor, the contract and also the revenue generated from this contract. This is an important point, for the civil society as a component. The second point will be related to what most of the intervener has said, is the value chain. So the value chain will be how to involve the African private sector. And my colleague Dilwayo have talked about the African mining vision that we have developed in Ghana, and it has been shared, but most people maybe do not, look at it, because it has resolved most of the problem related to local content, to the linkages, to all what we can gain as far as, value chain is concerned. So it is important to have a look at it and to be able to privilege the African local private. For not being so long, the third point, the most important for me, is the access of our community to it. So yes, the agenda may be considered as, a Western agenda. They want our critical minerals, they want the green energy to be used for green hydrogen, so on and so forth. But we should also focus on how we can profit from this opportunity, which are ours, to be able to provide energy for our different community and to be able to, impulse, development in our countries, and which, because we are lacking energy. Where I am, Mauritania, we have a lot of opportunities so far related to this potential, but still we are lacking energy. And you know that there cannot be development where there is no energy. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Value, for these important suggestions and practical ones. Now, let's turn to Joel. Hi, Joel. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the discussion and the presentation that the panel did before. I am Joel Rafael Manansu. I am from Publish What You Pay, Madagascar. So I will be very short. I am interested in asking about the national strategies that African countries should elaborate and should have, given that many countries actively are actually pursuing about getting the rushing for the transition minerals. I would like to ask, because Muthuso has talked before about the needed of policies and strategies aiming the value addition and benefication. How can civil society organization contribute to the elaboration of the national strategy for the transition minerals, and what roles can we play in shaping, implementing, and monitoring such a strategy to ensure that it aligns with our needs and also the needs of our local communities? Thank you.
Thank you, Joël. And I will take a last question and then turn back to our panelists. So please, Tamika, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. Apologies, I might not be able to turn on my camera because of bandwidth issues, but very interesting discussion. And I must say, I read the report, which has very interesting findings and recommendations. My comment, question, or concern is to the panelists, but also to Publish What You Pay, is how do we then use this research, especially the recommendations, to drive change? I'm from Zambia, I'm with Transparency International Zambia, and from the report, I saw some of the findings that relate to some of the projects in Zambia and potential for Zambia to develop with critical minerals. But even as we stand, I will tell you that government, for instance, has made some propositions to move forward, but there is this strong block from industry. So it's not only about capacity, it's not only about research and recommendations. I think there's this invisible power that is stopping or blocking countries in the global south, in this case in our region, from moving forward and adding value and benefiting from these minerals. So my question is, how do we as civil society, through Publish What You Pay and the other organizations, how do we then begin to influence this change in the global like a global power dynamics or shift through the AU? And I was hoping AMDC would be here, because I think it's not, I mean, countries have plans and they do want to implement those plans, but it's impractical in the global context that we now operate in. So I don't know how we can come together and address some of those bottlenecks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tamika. Very relevant question. And I wished Dr. Maritkita was here to take over on that last leg. But let's first turn on to you, Muthu. So there was a question for you on how to get those strategies, making them happen. How can we concretely in country at the national level influence them and also foster this regional integration that you have been speaking about?
Thank you very much for those very good questions. So I think the starting point, as I said, we have those principles. So you need to distill those principles into policies, into strategies, into laws. Yeah. And that's the responsibilities of countries. As I said, if you look at the US, they've got their own policies and strategies when it comes to critical minerals, whether it is China, the US got that Critical Raw Materials Initiative or the Critical Raw Materials Act. They're very clear. But if you come to these countries, ours, they are not even very clear to say, what do they really want to do? I had the opportunity to ask the Minister of Mines here in Zimbabwe to say, look, so what are you going to be doing with these in terms of strategy? And what he told me was basically that they are looking at addressing this in the Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill. But when you look at the Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill, it talks about a lot of other issues, but that's not really a strategy, because you are basically dealing with a component there. But you come up with a clear policy, clear strategies, and then clear laws. Others have specific laws that focus on that, but we try to clothe that under the major Mines and Minerals Act, which is so I think for me that's the starting point, and that's where we need society organized to say, look, there is value in coming up just like what others have done. Then of course, once that is done, then the focus will now be on implementation, but which we know we also have challenges with. So I think for me, it's coming up with those clear policies, then implement them. So that's where the role that we can play, convince the policymakers, convince our government. I mean, each government is different. I go to Zambia, associate organizations, you know better how to influence there. You go to DRC, you know best how to influence. And even here, we also have strategies. And of course, I agree that the MDC But even without that, the MDC itself is a strategy. So that's where we can actually start from. That's where countries can actually start from. That green mineral strategies. How can you cascade that to the national level? So countries can borrow from there and develop their strategy, just like what has happened with the Africa Mining Vision, where countries have borrowed to develop their laws and policies. So that's the same that can actually be done using that green mineral strategy. But there are those bigger issues that are there. I mean, the divisions that are there. I mean, we had expected that by now Africa will be mature and confident, negotiate with one voice, but that's not happening. So there's those bigger challenges. And even the MDC that we made the reference to, okay, it's actually struggling to have the MDC statute ratified. So who do we blame in that? I mean, this is our own document, but we have to beg to say, ratify this, and that does not instill confidence. So some of these problems are our own making, and that's why the global actors actually take advantage. So if we put our house in order, then we become more organized, we speak with one voice, we negotiate with one voice, then we stand a better chance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mutuso. Davy, there was this question from Tamika, you know, like, how can we concretely as civil society break those kinds of lobbies from private sector and other stakeholders which are impeding in a certain kind of way the achievement of this continental market or value chain of transition minerals that we are aiming for? What would be your recommendations on that?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we have to look at, for me to answer Tamika, I have to look at Joel's question, which was to say, do we have we'll use word critical, do we have critical mineral strategies in our countries? Because the strategy will allow us to have a vision. So you will find out that most of our mineral beneficiation or local content policies are not recent. So you can talk of, if you talk of 2011 in this age, the things are moving faster than than what our legislators or our policymakers are behind. So in Zambia only, only in Zambia where we have found a critical mineral strategy for the country. But that document is also very thin if you compare it with the Australia, Canada, and so. But let's give a chance to Zambia, because when you go into their strategy, which is the strategy 2024 to 28, you see that they are clear that the role of private sector is going to be based on a triple P, public private partnerships. And in that context, you will see that the Zambian government is talking about owning, the state being owning, like having a production sharing agreement in the entity that is going to be given a mining license or value addition status in the special economic zones that are going to be created. So for us, I think we need now to also urgently move a civil society from the high level to the ground.
Yeah.
Because already there are feasibility studies and locations identified for special economic zones in Zambia. But what happens in a special economic zone, we need to know, because there are incentives there. Some of them may include, they may have fiscal implications. There may be tax holidays or some form of incentive that may not be consistent with our standard for a just transition. If we are using the just transition framework, or if we are using the SDGs, we need to be having a standard of the way which we can use to hold governments accountable. But the question Tamika is asking has to do with private sector engagement. And remember, as civil society, we have also our own views about engaging the private sector. You hear that maybe you are now on the table with the devil. Let's go and demonstrate in campaigns, name shaming, but there's also strategy for us to engage the private sector, not as individuals, the private sector associations. They need to be engaged, they need to be conscientized, they need to be informed. And I think that that can help to unblock some of the I wanted to find an opposite of Pan-African, but let's just say we need a Pan-African private sector to emerge so that it drives also some of the valuation processes that we are talking about.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you, Davy. So colleagues, we have less than 4 minutes left. I will give 30 seconds each to Aisha Barry, Elizabeth Nkolo Aisi, and Idris Linger. I saw your hand, but I'll give you 30 seconds each, and then we will need to wrap up. Yeah, so please, Aisha, if you're still there. If not, Elizabeth, please, the floor is yours. Can you come on? You're still on mute, I think. Please, open your mic. Je pense que votre... And yes, Idris, definitely, and all of you, if you have further comments, if you have additional suggestions, questions, whatever, beyond this webinar, feel free to reach out to us. Ulay, if you can drop our email in the chat box, please, so that colleagues can reach us. Allez-y, allez-y. Allez-y, Elisabeth, on vous entend.
Ok, merci pour la parole donnée. Nous voulons, comme société civile, que nous ayons l'espace libre pour nous exprimer. L'espace civique ici est très comprimé. Et puis, les lois, on les cache. Nous sommes 3 partis. Et maintenant, pour aller signer avec les explorants ou les exploitants, nous ne figurons pas. Nous naviguons comme ça. On va chez les femmes riveraines. Bon, à la fin, quelle est la stratégie que la société civile doit mettre en place pour mieux suivre les femmes riveraines? Moi, je parle. Et en plus, il n'y a pas de connaissances, il n'y a pas de finances. Qu'est-ce que Publish What You Pay va mettre comme politique pour que la société civile essaye de travailler? Militants, nous le faisons déjà et tous les jours. Mais en vain. Voilà.
Merci beaucoup. Merci pour votre contribution. Et puis, je suis désolée, mais je dois... Ah, Aïcha, est-ce que vous souhaitez toujours prendre la parole? Je vois votre main levée. Are you still there? You have 30 seconds if you're around. Okay, if this is an old hand, Idris, I'll give you 30 seconds and we can, of course, follow up by email if you want.
Oui, merci. C'est clair que 30 secondes, c'est petit, mais déjà pour vous féliciter pour le travail, je pense que vous demandez ce que la société civile peut faire, mais c'est déjà bien ce que Publish What You Pay a fait. Vous avez donné un background, un document qui permettra de réfléchir davantage. Mais peut-être que c'est quelque chose qu'on pourrait voir, hein, organiser avec Publish What You Pay. Peut-être qu'il faut arrêter, un peu comme le disait Elisabeth, qu'il faudrait arrêter de dire ce qu'on attend des gouvernements uniquement. J'ai bien vu leur comportement, ou des partenaires au développement, mais de véritablement adresser la question de comment nous nous impliquons en tant que société civile en tant que partie de la solution et non pas simplement en tant que critique des autres parties prenantes. Et je pense de ce point de vue que votre travail est un très bon début. Je le lirai avec beaucoup d'attention et merci de donner
Merci.
l'opportunité de commenter. Nous espérons juste que vous aurez la force d'organiser une autre rencontre où on discutera des
C'est dans les
propositions.
plans.
Voilà.
Oui, oui, oui. Merci beaucoup, Idriss. Et, les commentaires sont bien reçus et pour répondre à certaines des remarques et des questions aussi en revenant à ce que Tamika avait dit, nous, à Publier ce que vous payez, vous le savez, nous voulons être les catalyseurs de cet effort de la société civile vers une société plus juste et aussi pleine d'équité dans cette vision sur le long terme de la transition énergétique en Afrique. Donc, ce n'est qu'un début. Le lancement de ce rapport a été fait comme un levier pour justement amener cette discussion sur la table et l'objectif est vraiment d'influencer non seulement les gouvernements ou le secteur privé, mais nous-mêmes, société civile, sur ce que nous pouvons faire collectivement, c'est de vraiment lancer cette dynamique collective. Vous savez qu'il existe le groupe de travail sur les minerais de transition que nous vous invitons toujours à rejoindre. Il y a la campagne Just Minerals Africa qui est en cours, que nous vous invitons aussi à rejoindre. Tous ces efforts-là sont faits pour que nous puissions vraiment fédérer nos efforts et arriver à des résultats un peu plus impactants. Ce n'est qu'un début. Il suivra d'autres discussions. La semaine prochaine, comme vous le savez certainement, il y a la Climate Week qui se déroulera à New York avec le Summit for the Future également. Donc, nous amènerons notre recherche là-bas vers les niveaux de décision supérieurs, si je puis dire, au niveau global. Et ça répond à la question de Tamika. Comment est-ce qu'on peut influencer les choses et les gouvernements? Il y a plusieurs couches d'influence que nous pouvons utiliser au niveau local avec l'aide de nous tous ici présents, au niveau régional en influençant par exemple l'Union africaine, la communauté SADC, le COMESA, etc. Mais aussi il y a le niveau global qu'il faut absolument influencé que nous ne devons pas oublier. Donc, nous sommes déjà ravis qu'il y ait ce panel organisé par le secrétaire général des Nations Unies sur la gouvernance des minerais critiques. Nous y contribuons activement et c'est justement pour cela que nous tenions à organiser ce webinaire avant cette semaine importante à New York. Il y aura d'autres actions qui seront menées. Donc, je vous invite vraiment à rester connectés avec nous et à poursuivre ensemble ces efforts qui ont été entamés, notamment à travers cette recherche. Nous sommes déjà au-delà du temps imparti, donc je me dois de vous laisser, mais nous restons en contact. Vous avez eu le contact d'Ouley, notre collègue qui s'occupe directement de cette recherche. J'imagine que l'interprétation ne fonctionne pas, je ne sais pas. Donc, je vous invite à rester en contact avec nous. So, dear colleagues, I'm not sure that the interpretation is working. I was just saying that this webinar is just a start. The report has been launched and we will follow up with further actions. We will take this research to the New York Climate Week next week and also to all possible instances in Africa, because there are several layers that we need to influence, not only on the national level, but also regional and global. So you can count on us for the rest of our collective advocacy. Please keep in touch. And you have an email in the chat box through which we can, still interact. An hour is not sufficient, unfortunately, for discussing these important matters, but more will follow. So I just wanted to thank you again, Davy and Mutuso, for agreeing to take part in this conversation today. And also a big thanks to Publish What You Pay team who prepared this webinar and to all of you for joining us today. So take care until next time. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, chers amis. À la prochaine. Prenez bien soin de vous. Ciao. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.